The following audio recording has been designed for learning purposes only. Do not share, distribute, or provide any type of copies, or this audio lesson will not be made available to you. Good luck with today's lesson.
They will do ADA, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. Well, hold on, ADEA. When I say that one, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act is ADEA, and then we have the Disability Act, which is the ADA. You know, that's why I said I kind of wanted a preference, because one's ADA and one is ADEA. So be careful on those, because sometimes it gets confusing when you see it, you know, when you get there. So we'll look at the 501 of the Rehabilitation Act, as well as Title I of the Americans with Disability Act. Now, what are the procedural rules then for actions when we are going to involve the EEOC? And the rules are going to be a little different, because we have to look at, first off, does your state have a local agency, a state agency you would go to first, or do they not have a state or local agency, and then we're just going to start with the EEOC? Do you see where we're going? So this really is going to vary, because depending on if you have a state or local agency, then you, the charging party, and don't forget the charging party, in a sense, if you end up in court, think plaintiff for a minute, but who's the charging party? So I said I was going to pick on Brad for a minute, and he said he'd be willing to. Let's just assume for a minute Brad did not get the job because I discriminated on the basis of his sex. Okay, here, he's the charging party. He has to first say, okay, do we have the EEOC in the state? You know, is there a state agency I must go to, or do I start with the EEOC? If he has that state agency, then what he's going to do, he will file his complaint with that agency, and he has to wait 60 days or until the termination of that state proceeding before he can go further. He goes to the EEOC. You see where we're going? So the state will start at first. The other thing is, when we're talking about this, I said Brad was my employee, and we kind of talked about it last class. Remember when I had the situation with the union and the guy wasn't hired, and we said, is that protected? This could apply hypothetically to a current employee, a former employee, a prospective employee. You know, because maybe he says, I didn't get the job because I was discriminated against on the basis of sex or something like that, or my race, or my religion, and that's why I didn't get it. Again, whoever initiates it, though, is going to have the burden first. They're going to have to prove the burden, and once they meet their burden, it will shift over to the employer. Okay. Let's talk about if you don't have a state agency. If there isn't any state or local agency, then the charging party, they can go directly to the EEOC and file their claim, and they have to do this within 180 days. So do you see how the rules are a little different? Because if we have a state agency, you go to the state agency first, you wait for either 60 days or whenever they terminate it, and before you proceed further. And if we don't have one, then you can go directly to the EEOC as long as it's filed within 180 days of when that action occurred. So whenever I discriminate against them, let's just assume we don't have the state agency right now. He has 180 days, which is pretty much, 6 months? All of a sudden, if on that purpose, he waits 2 years now to file the action, guess what they're probably going to tell him? Sorry, you waited, too long, statute of limitations ran. You should have done this within 180 days of bringing it. And when you'll see, when we get to things like sexual harassment and stuff, that can be more than one instance. So I could harass him today, I could harass him a week later, and I could harass him 3 months from now. Each one is a separate, guess what? 180, 180. Yeah, is a separate occurrence. So yeah, the clock starts ticking on each one there. So even if he's too late on that very first instance, he might have me on a couple others, depending on when it occurred. Okay, the individual has to belong to a protected class in order to prevail in their Title VII lawsuit. So who is really considered then a protected class? So when we get to our protected classes, this is where we are going to look at race, color, sex, religion, natural origin. I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Am I forgetting someone? Race, color, sex, religion.
What's creed? I always hear that one.
Creed kind of went, I think, with yes, it was used, and they're starting to delete that. It was along the lines, I think, with the creed, like, what was your creed? I think it went with the color and everything, like your...
I thought it was like race or ethnicity.
Yeah, your race. Because that's what I was going to say, usually a lot of times like with the black and the white and the creed, but I don't think they're using that. A lot of places are starting to delete the word creed.
Okay.
from the thing. It is, and it's funny because somebody else had it, and it's not funny, I shouldn't say that, but somebody else had asked it because you don't see it too much. Like, it's so embedded in there, but they really don't use it.
Right.
I don't want to say use it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that word, they're starting to, I think, just drop it from a lot of places. The create out of there. So let's talk about these when we are talking about, I just want to make sure I have them on. Yeah, when we're talking about who's our protected class. Now, if you are discriminated against in any of these categories, right, it's a violation of Title VII. And the discrimination can occur through testing. It can occur through sexual harassment. It can occur through any pay disparity. These are different avenues that we can have. So you can see there's a lot of ways that we can claim that, hey, we've been discriminated against on these. So let's look at the different classifications. And I'm going to start with race first, because what do we mean when we're talking about race? Race applies to all members, right, of the following groups. But who do you think are the racial groups? Without even glancing at your book for a minute, what groups would you have thought for race?
White, black.
Mm-hmm. Those were two.
Hispanic.
Okay, you said Hispanic. I'm going to kind of just put Hispanic over here for a minute.
Asian.
Who said Asian? We have Asian. Okay. And what else?
What is Latino is Hispanic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Native American.
Hmm?
Native American.
Native American. Hispanic wasn't one of the original four.
So am I
And
wrong
then-
by saying Hispanic?
Yes. It's not one of the races and the ones yet. Do you get what I'm saying? We're not saying eventually this can't get what? Bigger and modified by time. Do you get where we're going? But right now, when this statute came out, these are the four races.
How old is
White,
this?
black, Asian, 1964.
So what if they were Hispanic, then they're, it doesn't count? You know what I mean?
Right, or do you identify them? Because a lot of times they might put white there. Yeah.
I thought it was that Hispanics counted as white because my mom grew
Yeah.
up during segregation, and she said that Hispanics were allowed to use the white bathrooms and like the white.
And that's why I pointed to this one, because that's why usually you classify yourself as white. You know? And this being said though, and I know they classify there, and unless they decide to want a change, do you get where I'm going? Unless legislators change it, maybe with the whole Mexican immigrant, do you know what I mean? That, hey, we want our own separate class. But right now, no, they don't. They all usually classify here. You know, you go with them. So it's really those four main. You're either white, black, Asian Pacific, which, by the way, what else would fall under white? If you come from what other area, region? Europe. European descent, you're going to usually classify yourself as white. Any questions on that so far? So those are the groups that can, and by the way, these groups can actually seek more than one area of discrimination. And we'll look at this kind of in a way. So when we're saying is, you might be white, but you might have one more category here that you can claim. Do you see where we're going at discrimination on? The same with the blacks, the same with the Asian. You can do certain things. So like if we look at Native Americans, right? So they might claim, hey, you violated me on the basis of my race. They might also say, hey, you violated me on my color. And I'm just going to do this so you can see. And they might also say, hey, you violated me because of my national origin. So do you see how you kind of get into, you might have more than one category that you're claiming that they discriminated you on. If we're talking whites, usually it's going to be race or color. If we're looking at Asian Pacific, usually it could be race, it can be color. Okay? And it can also be national origin. So, this being said, and I know I'm abbreviating those, I'm going to make this really fast because I heard it on the radio coming down. So, you know the coronavirus? One of the schools, I can't recall what school it was. I just heard it on the radio that one of the groups had a party and they called it the coronavirus party. And what they did is they had a bunch of pictures, I guess, of Coronas in a tub, you know, the beer Corona, and then a bunch of people were wearing masks around their thing, and they are in trouble with their school because they said that violates their policy because it might associate with what? background, ethnics. Do you see where we're going? And then they were talking about, they go, yeah, I've heard that some bars and all this might want to do that too, throw these parties. But do you see how some of this can come into play? But I'm just kind of wanted to pull it out because that was the whole thing. Yes, it originated over in China, the coronavirus, but people were doing it more to do the play of, oh, let's have a corona virus party
Yeah,
for the corona bears. And they were trying to highlight what? The bear.
yeah.
You know, the coronas and all that, and then using the medical mask, trying to make a pun of it. You know, not necessarily that were they maybe intending to discriminate on someone's ethnicity, not necessarily.
Yeah.
You know, but again, I just wanted to point that out that there is the school that is, yeah, they're in trouble for that right now. That there's, it was like a, I don't want to say a fraternity, but somewhere it was a group of students, and they said it violated the school policy, and I'm assuming. I cannot remember what school it was, so I'm assuming it was probably like they had it at their dorm, they're posting pictures,
Okay.
like a
Yeah,
fraternity.
mine immediately went like, oh, school's having a party, that's gotta be like elementary school, and then you mentioned Corona, and I was like, that doesn't sound right, Brad.
No.
That's
Who was there? Did you have a question?
Wasn't it Alabama's anything?
I can't remember what school it was. I just, like I said, I was driving in and I heard him saying the school was in trouble for doing this and blah, blah, blah. Because then they started talking about bars and,
I'll Google it.
They said
Yeah.
some of the students were offended by it too.
yeah. Yeah. And like I said, sometimes people do it and they really don't do it with the intent to discriminate, but you can see where things will impact and could have consequences. If you're black, it's going to be race or color. So you can see, though, how we get into there. On there, and this is going by your race, how you can have more than one. Okay, let's talk about religion. Employers are required under Title VII to accommodate their employees or their prospective employees' religion practices. So if they can reasonably accommodate you for your religion accommodation, right, and it's not going to cause them a real big burden, they should really be accommodating you. So let's say they go to hire an employee. And let's just say Caleb. Let's just say, I mean, I gotta think of who, I'm Catholic, guys, so be patient with me, because really my day of rest is
No, it's
supposed to be
okay.
Sunday.
Because like,
So is it Jewish, can't work on Saturdays?
it's Baptist, so
Baptist.
we sit in the back row, we don't do anything.
But there's, say your religion, you're not allowed to work on Saturday.
Yeah.
He comes in to work in my employment. He says, I have this, my religion does not allow for me to work on Saturday. Could I accommodate that?
It's not that hard to accommodate.
Most likely I could, as long as it doesn't lead into my seniority list. You get where we're going, where I'm infringing on someone's seniority rights, or, you know, if it's de minimis and stuff
How
like
would
that.
how would that infringe on like something like seniority rights?
Well, because if someone has more seniority, they say I don't have to work, or, do
Oh,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
that
Like
would-
that. But here's the thing, if I have all of a sudden like, okay, I'm Catholic, we're told not to, you know, Sunday's supposed to be my day of rest. Could I work on Saturday for him? Sure,
Yeah.
you take Sunday for me, so I don't have to work,
Yeah.
I'll take your Saturday. And that's what we're talking about. If it's not gonna cause a big thing here, and they can reasonably accommodate. Or like I said, remember someone religious, hey, we're not allowed to cut our beards. You know, we are supposed to let it keep growing, because you do have some of those where they don't really cut and they let it trim, or maybe they do that. Depending on what they do, it might be, oh, okay, maybe we tie it up in one of those nets, at least put it all up and you make it real tight or something like there.
Was the coronavirus party in Albany, New York?
That's what I don't know, because I can't remember
I
what it's
found an
called. There's a
article.
few that have been going
I
around,
found
because you
an
mentioned
article that
Alabama,
one
you thought.
happened in New York. I just don't know if that's the one.
Right, and I don't know if that's the one they were talking about. I just knew they said the school, so that's why I said I apologize. There. So what we talk about there, if it's a small cost, you're going to have to accommodate. Title VII does allow religious societies to grant hiring preferences. So let's say I am a school and we are Jewish. I can then discriminate against you if you're not what? Jewish. So let's say you are Catholic, or pick any religion you want to give me, but you're not Jewish. I can say, sorry, I'm not hiring you. But I can hire Ashley because maybe she is. You can do that? Yes, because why? Because my business, if I'm teaching Jewish, do you see where I'm going? And it's just all Jewish and it's a
business
school.
practice, so
It's a business.
not discriminatory.
So like, And that's what we're saying, or a Muslim, or whatever you want to put in that religion, what's
Right.
in there. If it's your business and that's what you're tailoring, like we're teaching you our religion, we're teaching you this in the school, I'm not going to want a Catholic probably to come in and what?
Right, but then, so that's only religion, like Hooters wants like pretty girls, like is that discriminating, you know, if they,
Hooters has been sued a few times.
yeah.
Hooters has been sued for telling people they have to lose weight.
Yeah, no, my sister used to be a dancer and they told her that.
Yeah. You know, and sometimes they'll say, well, business, we're trying to bring in business and all that. And they're like, yeah, but, you know, and you do, sometimes you can see now where the line starts coming. But for religion, if it is for certain things, or clothing stores, sometimes we can discriminate now because how many of us have ever had to get our gowns or something tailored for prom, weddings? All right, let's be the girls for a minute. How many of you would want guys going up and down you doing all the measurements?
All right. I don't know.
Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
I
So,
don't mind. Like,
huh?
I don't mind if it's a boy or a girl. Like, you're not focusing on my body. You're just looking at the dress.
Well, that's what you hope. But do you see where we're going? Where they'll allow for some of that to say, we're in the business being a seamstress, we're only going to hire females because most females will probably don't want men touching what?
Their body.
All over their body and grabbing and touching. And I usually say this for the guys. Same thing. They could hire just guys. And I always laugh because I go, guys might think differently and they might say, we wouldn't mind if a girl. But I always go back to the Friends episode. And I always think of Joey, Chandler, and Ross. And he needs the tailor. You guys all know which one. And by the way, I heard they're doing a Friends reunion where it's not necessarily a new show and they're getting paid $2.5 million
An episode.
each.
That's
I don't even think it's more episode. I think it's just
I-
one show.
Yeah, I heard it's
Oh,
only like an
it's-
hour long.
Yeah, and I heard
not
it's
even
supposed to
an
be
hour.
them just sitting and talking. It's not really even a show.
Yeah.
And they're all making $2.5 million for this.
So much money there in that though. Like, that show's gonna make so much.
But I think of that episode where what happens, Chandler says, I need a tailor, so what does Joey do? He sends him over to his tailor, and you guys all remember, who's seen the episode will know what I'm talking about, because he walks back in and he goes, Joey, your tailor's a bad, bad man. He goes, what are you talking about? He always goes up the thing, moves it over, and goes down. He goes, Ross, tell him that's what it is. And Ross looks at him and he goes, yeah, that's fine. And he goes, in prison. But do you know what I mean? Because it's supposed to be there was a little more touching
Right.
than what should have been expected. Again, you know, could go into the harassment and all that depending on your employer, you know, if you're an employee. But that's what we're talking about. So in those areas, you can discriminate. And we'll come back to that because that's really a bona fide qualification. Like that situation. That's when we get into the exceptions of that, when you can purposely discriminate. And that
Right.
is one of them.
Okay, so if you're like doing the tailor thing and you're a girl, but they find out you're gay, they can't fire you. Like, what would that go up under?
Which will get us into sex in a minute. Keep that one for a second, because we'll come into that, the gay on where because I want to talk about the sex and what that relates to and all that. And I do get where you're asking there, because they're in the tailor and they're in the business. Let's say they do come in. Let me do this. So when we do the religion, we'll get into those where you can hire particular religions, and I'll come back to the bona fide. Now I'm going to go into the sex. When we do sex under the discrimination statute, when this was created, it only meant, guess what, guys? Male or female. So if I try to allege here that you discriminate me on the basis of sex because I'm gay, right? I'm a lesbian, whatever, it kind of fails under that statute, but a lot of your states and local areas, they're implementing statute that will cover on the basis of
Yeah, I was gonna
sexual
ask if
orientation.
they've been amended.
This one hasn't been amended yet. It's the others that have been created
state.
by your states and all that have allowed for that. And by the way, keep in the back of your mind, I said 42 USC 2000E, our discrimination statute for this. Michigan has Michigan Elliott, the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. That's kind of the equivalent to, guess what? This. So you could be suing, you could be suing me, you could be suing me, you could be suing me. Not under the federal statute, you might claim I'm also violating what? State. So I got two. But yeah, so, and that's why I kind of wanted to hold off when I got to sex, just to kind of do there. And then you look to see if you have one of the other ones. So if you're going by gender, they're not really discriminating because they're hiring her. The question is, did they let them go because of their orientation? And then you find the statute that applies there. Yeah. Do you know?
A while ago, you were just screwed if that was the case, because it wasn't a guy or girl.
Yeah, because really, when they did this statute, it was really on the basis of male or female. Somebody else got the position over you. And what happens is McDonnell Douglas is the landmark case for discrimination. So it laid out all the elements that you had to show you were a member of a protected class. You were qualified for it. Somebody who got it was less qualified for it. Do you get where we're going on it? And they were not a protected class. Yeah.
So does like transgenders fall under there too? Because I don't want to offend anybody just in case, but like you were born a male or female, like could they, does that fall up under the sex?
Those are all going to be, guess what? Orientation and things that are coming in. And, okay, I'm going to say the same thing. I'm not going to be saying this to offend either. I have heard people speak about that, and I have heard people, and they go, you know, it's weird because when you're born, they either classify you male, female, and I'm going to apologize because I do not know the term for when you actually have both body parts. So really you can, thank you. I'm like drawing the blank on that one. So I'm like, really there's 3 terms they'll either identify you as there. And I've heard people say that because they're like, gender-wise, they sometimes feel some of them, it's 1, 2, or 3. And then they look at like the transgender, like maybe the orientation, like, yes, you're this, but you know. But there is the other arguments. I've gone to those.
Just out of curiosity, have any of the states amended their EEOC laws to like non-binary?
Honestly, I'd have to look and see, because I don't know all the states.
Because I wonder, like, I wouldn't think that like the term non-binary would, you know, fall under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, because that just specifies male and female, and there's no.
And you guys can kind of see why. In a way, look at our society right now. Look at the judges that are being put on. Look at how groups are saying we're not represented or they're taking away our rights. Because if you go back and follow comment, like some of these laws, and they don't give you rights for that, now all of a sudden you start taking away some of those rights. You know, people are saying we've made advancements. We're allowing for things here. We're allowing for things here. But you can see, I mean, I think it's come away like a long ways from where it was in 1964 to say, you know, were people there, especially when you think of the bathrooms and stuff. And I'm, you know, not to pull it out, I mean, yeah, we're what, 20, so about 60 years. I mean, 60 years ago, people couldn't use certain bathrooms because of their color down south. You know, and then it's, you look at that and sometimes you look at it and go, I probably wouldn't think twice of it. Right. You know, back then they were like, oh no, you're this, you go here, you go here. And there was the case, and I don't think we'll do it, but if it's still in the textbook, there was a case actually with Ollie's, and that's what it was, where it was talking about, it's in blaw 1, the case with Ollie's, I think I've mentioned that one there, where it does the equal protection, because what do? When you're traveling down south, they made people get off the expressway, and instead of going to a restaurant because they didn't serve to the blacks, remember, you couldn't get the restaurant that was right off the exit ramp. They only served to whites. You had to go into the city, you know, like miles and miles in, and then you'd have to come back to get back on and keep traveling. And they sued under the Equal Protection Clause. You know, again, but if we get into employment, the employers might start getting, well, now you're discriminating on the basis of race type thing there, or the origin, or whatever we want to go in on there. Any questions so far? So when we get to sex, though, think man, female for this. Keep in the back of your mind, state laws, though, are allowing for your orientation. You know, and I just want to highlight that that never meant orientation when it was first created. It's your state statutes that are amending that are allowing for the orientation.
So what, will federal follow?
Usually sometimes it might be a big push of the states, or they might keep theirs and allow the state ones, you know what I mean? And that's why I said, and don't forget, you can sue under both. So you can sue under state, you can sue under federal. And a lot of times when you do that, though, you start in federal court because it's a less time period to get to trial. Because in state court, it takes 2 years to get to trial usually, where in federal it takes 1. And then what they'll do is apply state law to the state issues. They'll follow the state law. So, yeah. And it'll be, like I said, it'll be interesting because I think when we get to age, you'll see that. I always made comments. I wonder if that'll change. When we get to sex, you also can have sexual harassment claims. So there are 2 types of sexual harassment claims. So we know this deals with, we said, male, female. Okay. And then we get into sexual harassment. I'm just going to put that there. So when we do sexual harassment, there's 2 types. We have tangible employment action and hostile work environment. When we are doing this one is kind of the famous term that people would say they didn't know what it meant in Trump's quid pro quo. This is your quid pro quo. Okay, that really is a quid pro quo action. This involves situations where you have a supervisor, they are performing an official act of the enterprise against a subordinate worker because of the employer's refusal to submit to the supervisor's demand. Do you get now why I said it's a quid pro quo? And what happens, you're asking for sexual favors. In this type of action, we will automatically make the employer vicariously liable. And this, because it's the supervisor here. And this is where I said, Brad, can I pull you back into this one when we were doing something the other day? Remember we were talking about emails not having expectation of privacy, and I kind of made a comment and I said, let's just assume for a minute I sent something to Brad. I said, and we'll talk more about it next class because it really could get the employer liable for situations. Let's assume I'm Brad's boss. And I send Brad an email. And I tell him, Brad, excuse the language, guys, but I said, Brad, your ass looks really great in those khakis you wore the other day. You should wear those more often. You know, or anything like that. And he feels what? Uncomfortable on this. Or well, that actually gets into the harassment, the second one. But let's say then in there I tell him, hey, you sleep with me or you won't get the promotion. Who am I to him? I'm the what? Boss.
Supervisor.
I'm his supervisor. And I told him he had to sleep with me in order to get what? The promotion, the quid pro quo. In order for him to get the promotion, he had to sleep with me, right? So here's what they're going to say is, hey, you've harassed him because there's a benefit there. Because if he doesn't sleep with you, odds are he's not going to get what? The promotion. And I could give it to someone else. And that other person, by the way, could have been less qualified. Because let's say, Caleb, can I bring you in? It's either you or James, since you guys are the other guys in my room right now.
I don't care.
James, we could bring you in too eventually,
Oh,
right?
geez.
But I just took Caleb at the moment because you're next to him. Let's say Caleb got the position over you. And you found out Caleb was also what? Sleeping with me.
Yeah.
Right? He's probably going to sue me under a discrimination theory and the company because he's going to say, hey, tangible employment, there was sexual harassment. Also, he'll probably do a sex, I mean, he is the same sex and everything, but you might do that because of the fact that he's giving favors. You're going to really go for the harassment one. The tangible.
Okay, so in terms of a case like this, could Brad potentially save that email as proof to show the burden of proof in a case like that?
And if he doesn't have the email, what they'll do is when they get to discovery, any and all emails, and he roughly knows, he could try and do it through discovery to find those emails in the company thing if they're still there and not deleted. And
I just wondered, what's the likelihood of him being able to use that? Because that's a dicey email. I mean, you don't just send those types of emails every day.
right, and that might be his. So when he goes to his agency within what? Those time frames, depending state or non-state, right, agency,
Yeah.
he might say, look, these are the emails I'm getting. This is what she sent. I asked her to stop, and she what? Refuses. Or I brought it, because that'll come to this one, hostile work environment. Let's say the company has a policy in place, and now I'm still sending him in the emails.
Oh, like a disciplinary.
And our policy says if the boss is, harassing, he should maybe report it then to, if you can't go to the supervisor, because I am the supervisor, who's above the supervisor? He reports it now to the higher ups,
Yeah.
but they don't do anything. Then he might have proof to show that, hey, look, I even followed company policy, and you still let her be in charge of me. Because there's no necessarily, let's just say I didn't ask him to sleep with me for the position. We're just saying I'm sending him those emails. Hey, you look great. You look hot. You whatever. Do you know what I mean? If I'm sending him all that, then what happens here is he's going to go this, because I'm still supervisor, but I'm making him feel what? Uncomfortable. And we're assuming it's unwanted. Something that's unwanted, not making him feel uncomfortable. If he wanted it, there's a difference if all of a sudden, let's say he initiated. Do you know what I mean? But then I might have to show, wait, this was what? Consensual.
Yeah, I had a question about that.
Yeah.
If it's consensual at first, like you're dating your boss or whatever, but then he fires you, or you guys get into an argument and break up, and then you go and report him for sexual harassment.
That's why they always tell you not to date the boss, or that person in that position, because it gets them into, it could either this or this. Either way, it gets dicey. It really does get heavy, because if the company knows you're dating, so can I have you date Brad right now? And let's just say Brad's the boss at the moment, right? If you two start dating else and he became your boss, let the company know, and what are they going to do? Oh, we don't want you working for Brad anymore, but we got the same position, you can work for James or Tanisha. Because this way, it what?
Diffuses
Separates it, because one, people in the office, because now Ashley, Abby, and Kim might all think you're getting favors over them, because you guys all, the four of you all work for Brad, but you're what? Yeah.
Okay.
Where at least if now you're working for Tanisha, we take you away from this, and these three aren't maybe gonna feel as there. The other thing is, let's say you do break up. Now, do you see what happens if you're still working for him? Oh no, it was never consensual. I felt like I had to from the get-go. So it's kind of opening the company up, and that's why a lot of times they have those inter-office policies where, especially some companies might outright say they don't want people dating. Some will be, okay, if you're dating, we're just gonna move you where? To a different department. That way you're not directly working under that person.
Okay.
There are a lot of things, right, where like a lot of bosses will date like a lower down employee, and it's like almost always a bad scenario for the boss.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, I felt like, because they had the power, abuse of power. But that's what I've heard at least a lot in the news.
And that's what it is because who has the upper hand in this relationship? Really think about it. The boss. Because anything you get out of it, if it affects your benefits, right, your employment, your living, anything like that, like your money, that's why we say they're automatically going to hold the employer liable for this. You've created that situation. But let's say we put stuff in place, and now it's not directly going to affect you, benefit there, but now all of a sudden you start getting those emails. James, your employer, and you're dating James, and James starts sending you all those emails, and you don't follow company policy, though, they're going to say, wait a minute, we had a policy in place, though, and she refused to what? Follow it, and she went right to court action. How could we remedy this if we had a policy in place that, hey, you feel uncomfortable? He's your, supervisor, but he's making you feel uncomfortable and you didn't come to us? How can we correct that situation? Or say it's against me. How do they correct it if somebody brought it to their, doesn't bring it to their attention?
So if the boss gets in trouble, but then they find out that it actually was consensual, could the boss sue their ex or whatever? Because they got them in trouble.
They might do defamation. Again, you get into other, do you know what I mean? Because if their reputation's harmed as a result of it and they did it intentionally, or did they not? Do you see where we're going? I mean, there's a ton of possibilities you can see that can come out of that situation. When we do the hostile work, I told you it's the supervisor's conduct doesn't affect the employees. Again, the employer can raise the affirmative defense to these actions by showing we had a policy in place and they failed to follow the policy. if they don't follow it and stuff like that. If all of a sudden I go outside and say, oh, I'm just going to file my action and never let them know what's going on. If I followed it and they still don't do anything, then that's going to actually help me to say, look, I followed their policy, I did what they wanted, and they still kept that person in charge. And they still allowed for the harassment to occur. What if the sexual harassment is done by a non-supervisor? Because I've been kind of focusing on whether or not this person's your supervisor. If it's a non-supervisor, the employer will be liable only if they knew about the misconduct and they failed to take any action or should have taken action. And we might say then that they were negligent because, hey, you should have known or you were aware of it and you failed to what? Follow up on this. Any questions on any of that so far? Let's talk about national origin then. Title VII protects against, I'll come back to that one. I forgot that one wasn't in my notes. All right.
I'm sorry, did you say the hostile work environment, that has to do with like higher ups, as like bosses and stuff?
When you get to, there's supervisor or non-supervisor. When you get to, so if it's a supervisor, if it's not going to economically hurt you, like it's not sleep with me, give me the blowjob and I'll give you the position to get where we're going type thing, whatever it is, that right there is going to have an economic impact. That will be more this. Okay. If it's a non-economic impact and they're making those comments like, oh, you look really sexy, I really would like to sleep with you tonight, or you should wear those skirts more often, or ooh, wear those tight pants, I love it when you bend over, in those little like jeans you wear because your ass looks cute. Whatever you guys want to throw in there.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you could find offensive that would offend you if it's somebody that you really didn't want to hear it from. Think of it that way. Or that uneasy, uncomfortable feeling. Do you know what I mean?
So
Or
uncomfortable would be tangible
That-
employment, and hostile would be like
hostile is kind of they're making you uncomfortable in the situation. They're making that working environment kind of negative because it's a hostile working environment. Like you dread going to work because they're going to make comments on whatever you wear, or you know what I mean? Those inside jokes maybe, or it's always about talking about girls or guys or how big they are or how big she is, and that's what I'm saying. It makes you kind of that uneasy, uncomfortable, and it's also unwanted.
Yeah.
And you find it kind of offensive. Or there was one situation, I do know of a company, it was a Detroit company, many employees, they took an email. Good employees, may I add too, some that were probably the really good employees in the company, because it was an email that went around and they had a company policy that you should not forward emails that are could be offensive. Well, guess what? Some of these employees forwarded emails around that could be an offensive email, and they let all the employees go because it was company policy. If you're going to take anything like this and forward it, we are going to let you go. And some of these employees were very good employees. Wow. Some of the employees they let go really weren't doing their job. And when I say that, I'm not trying to be mean, but they're the ones that probably just went to do their hours, didn't work all the time, where the other ones really knew what was going on and did their job. But because that was their policy, they let all of them go. And some of those people had been there for like 20 years. Because they violated what? Company policy. There was one about, I remember one of the textbook ones had a joke in there where it was a joke about how men are better than, or how cookie dough is better than sex, or something like that. And some people found that to be offensive. That was going around where people were let go. And, it just depends where sometimes you got to kind of look at your company policy too. What is allowed, what isn't allowed, because they're trying to prevent, because don't forget, in the realm here, this is all employment law, so who could bear the liability? A lot of times it comes back to who? The employer.
Yeah.
For the employee's actions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do allow them some, that's why they can monitor your emails, that's why they can monitor the websites you go to, because they could be subject to what? Some hefty liability, depending on what somebody's doing, and especially email. If all of a sudden somebody said, well, yeah, they're sending me emails and they're harassing me in emails, and we don't allow them to monitor that, do you know what I mean? At least if they're monitoring and they're catching it, they might say, hey, we're catching that you're, doing some inappropriate stuff. Stop it, or else you will be disciplined, or now you're on warning, or yeah. So you do get into that type of thing there. Let me backtrack really fast, 801, because I was flicking pages, And I was talking about religion. We were talking about garments worn for a religion reason, because like you asked about the hat and all that stuff. There was a section on body art, work rules, and religious beliefs. And I just wanted to kind of point it out because you can tell with tattoos and stuff now, some of that is becoming some of the things. So you can see that that's starting to work its way into the courts on whether or not body art, do you have to accommodate that? A lot of times if you look at employers, they will ask you if you do have tattoos, depending on where you work, hospitals, anyone, sometimes even in restaurants, they'll ask you to do what? Yeah, wear long sleeves, cover up the tattoos, just because they don't want their customers to feel what? Offended as they're eating in family and all that. But there was the one case here where they, it was Red Robin, if you guys saw that one. There was an action against Red Robin for failing to provide the exemption form from its grooming policy for the religious tattoos surrounding his wrists. And the court actually went against Red Robin, if I correct from what I recall from reading that one, because they didn't show that it really affected the family-oriented, you know what I mean? Like that little tattoo around. But you do have the burden to show that, hey, people aren't going there, where if it's something else maybe on their arm or something, that might be something where somebody might not want to eat at that restaurant when they see all that. And I'm not trying to discredit and everything there. It's just some people have their what? Preference. Some people love body tattoos. Some people will go, doesn't do anything for me. So it just is that thing there. But it can come into things where people will ask you on that. I know in hospitals too, they don't like the tattoos, they don't like the rings and stuff, but I know I've seen some people sometimes will get a tattoo ring, in place of their ring. That way it's eternally there versus worrying about doing that. Let's talk about national origin, because I'm kind of up to there. Title VII does protect against national origins. So it protects members of all nationalities from discrimination. So you can't be excluded based on your physical standards if the standards are going to exclude persons of a particular national origin. So, okay, I do not mean this to come out. You guys know when I say these things, I'm not trying to discriminate. I'm just trying to put that in the broad. A lot of times when you think of someone Asian and you think of height, what do you think? Short. Most of the time you don't see 6, 7 feet Asians. I mean, I know there's some because I know a couple play basketball and all that. But most of them tended, you think of shorter, right? So all of a sudden, if I put a requirement in that you must be, let's just say 5'10", and now someone comes in and they're Asian, it almost looks like you could be discriminating on them because of their ethnicity. Do you see where we're going? Because what if they could do the work by just getting a ladder? Or something that accommodates, or maybe, you know what I mean, depending, what if it's a sit-down job? Yeah. But you put this height requirement in, because your purpose really was to discriminate and not hire Asians or something, yeah.
So like in the ladder scenario, right, so like, if you have shelving units or whatever, and if you're 5'10" or whatever, and you're able to reach stuff, but like if you're 5'5", you're gonna have to get that ladder. Could they say like, oh, it's gonna take you more time because you're gonna need that ladder. You're gonna have to get the ladder, go up it, and go.
Not at where they might not want people in that height though. And me saying this, their argument might be is these are heavy boxes that they're lifting, and because they're higher up, it's not as sturdy maybe. Mm-hmm. But again, if it's something you can reasonably accommodate, sometimes
so
that might be
a reasonable accommodation for that time wasted getting a ladder and then having to put it back or whatever.
Because how much, they might say, are you really losing that much money in the long run? Do you see where we're going? Could that reasonably accommodate things like that? The other one is language. If language is not a barrier for their job, right? Let's just say I have someone who cannot speak English at all, and I'm looking to hire someone now on the phones to do customer service.
Yeah.
Could I not hire that person then if they can't speak English? Right, because they're not going to be able to do the job, and I probably can't get that reasonable accommodation to get them to speak the English necessarily. But let's say their job really is just to do data entry. They can read English, they can read what they're doing, or they're just doing numbers and they can figure that out. Bless you. Do you see where we're going, the difference there? Can we do that?
Can they still hire you though? Because there might be some people that can't speak English that needs to call the company.
But how often that becomes how often of those calls, because here's the thing though, if you're on 24/7 and most of the calls come in English, do you know what I mean? And you only need that person maybe once, then you might seek someone out who's more bilingual, are trilingual or multiple languages wherever they are, but you might look for someone, can you speak English as well as this? So then that way when people call on that one. Have you guys ever done the other non-English lines? Oh, I've had that done to me a couple times. I one time accidentally hit Spanish. I didn't mean to. I ended up on their line. I was able to talk to her in Spanish and told her I didn't mean to give that line. I wanted the English. But I'll never forget one time I was working, they all go, Jen, pick up line so-and-so. There's a customer on the call for you. And I pick it up and I'm like, hello? And I hear it's the person all in Spanish because they purposely hit a Spanish customer service on me and sent it to me because they knew I spoke Spanish. I'm just like, you guys are so mean. But, yeah. But that's where you get into. Do you see where we're going? It may not be feasible for you to have somebody there. You know, and if that's their job.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is there. There are exceptions here when we get to Title VII for national origin. This is where I said bona fide occupational qualifications, testing, educational requirements, and seniority systems, which goes back to when we said bona fide. I kind of used the examples. Remember with religion, if you had that school, all one religion, you can bona fide, you can hire someone in all that religion. If you're a seamstress, we can get the same sex. Those are bona fide qualifications because of what we're dealing with. Yeah.
Does that school thing apply to race too? So like if you have a school like only for like African Americans, could you get that where it's for race or is it just religion? Or like sex
Usually
or any other thing?
the religion, the national origin, the bona fides and stuff, because you're doing it for that religion purpose. I would say probably no, because think of with our schools and everything, it's no longer separate but equal. Do you know what I mean? So students have the right to go everywhere. I don't think they're gonna, I'd have to check to see if there's any school that actually does that. Now, it's interesting because there is one school where there were 2 white professors who filed a discrimination lawsuit because they worked in an all-black. And they were the only 2 whites.
Okay,
And they claimed, do you know what I mean, where you get into the discrimination because of their race. To say, we didn't get this because we were white.
What would the exception be for like a seamstress? Like,
Well, that's where the bona fide. That's why we said, like, if you're at a tailor or a seamstress,
Oh.
you're probably going to hire all females in that employment. So I'm purposely not going to hire you at my seamstress place because
Yeah.
most women would want to be what?
yeah,
You know, touched by probably another woman.
yeah.
You know, and
Okay.
especially with the measurements, you know, in their movie, it just, you're trying to make the other person feel comfortable. And same with the tailor. You'd probably hire all guys for the tailor then. And that's what the bona fide comes in. Yeah. Any questions so far? Affirmative action, reverse discrimination. Affirmative action plans, this is where the employer can undertake a special recruiting to hire and train. Bless you if that was a sneeze. I'm not sure if it was or wasn't, but if it was, I'll say it. And train minorities and women in its workforce. In other words, what we're doing is we'll have a plan so we can have a diverse and representative workforce. We don't want it all maybe to be white males or something like that. We want to include the females. We want to include the minorities. So let's have this affirmative action plan in place so then we are hiring so many diverse, you know, or ethnicities, things like that will come into place. Now, there is a landmark case your book talks about. It's Andranad. They call it Andoran 1. It's a case that set forth the principles for evaluating affirmative action plans. And I'm going to read this verbatim just so you guys have it because part of their statement by the EEOC said this. Affirmative action is lawful only when it is designed to respond to a demonstrated and serious imbalance in the workforce, is flexible, is time limited, and applies only to qualified workers and respects the rights of non-minorities and men. You know, so I just wanted to kind of put that out there so you were aware. If the plan is not shown to be justified, or let's say it's unnecessarily trammels the interest of non-minority employees, they'll usually call that a reverse discrimination. We also have Equal Pay Act. That is another act where we will prohibit employers from paying employees of one gender a lower wage rate than they pay the other gender. Now, they do say that does not take into the exceptions where maybe we might have seniority or merit basis. Do you see where we're going? But if 2 people are kind of doing the same job, okay, and we have that, what they'll say is, okay, if this female's doing this job and this male's doing this job and they're equally the same, then you really should probably be paying them what? The same. And again, it's taking away some of those exceptions, because sometimes you might have seniority where if you have X amount of years and you make what? This amount, right. So as long as the women and the guy are the same amount of seniority, they might make the same. But if one has 5 years seniority and the other one has 20, you're not going to make what? The same. You know, but maybe someone around the same as you if you're doing the same thing there. So it does look at those type of things there. The other exceptions, I said merit ones. Measure earnings by quantity or quality is another exception that could apply in that situation. Differential based on any factor other than gender, as long as it's there. And it was interesting because if I'm not mistaken, I know I've seen in the paper there about the Equal Pay Act that I think it's expired at the federal level, but some states are actually using that because they've never amended that act. So some of the states are doing that right now. I think there's like 5 states that are pushing to keep that Equal Pay Act going on their thing there. Age discrimination. I always say this one's kind of interesting because age discrimination is your ADEA Act, and this prohibits discrimination by employers, union, and employment agencies against persons over 40 years of age. So you can be discriminated against on your age up until 39. But after 39, when you're 40 or older, you could possibly have an age discrimination claim. So it might be, not only did I not get the job because of my race, my sex, my religion, you might claim you also did not get the job because you're what? Age. I didn't get it because I'm 50 and they hired what? A younger worker who was not qualified, and I was more qualified, but they told me it was a reduction in force, but it really wasn't a reduction in force because they let go of what? All the 50-year-olds and hiring the thing, and then they went and hired all these 20-year-olds. Yeah.
There's that episode of New Girl, I don't know if you've seen it, but they have like this company, it's full of young people, and some lady like turns like 30, and so they fire her, and she files the age thing. And so they hire some like 60-year-old, and they're like, we just gotta hire him so that it looks like we have old people in this company.
Right. But what's really funny is because you said she's like 30. Technically, does that rule apply to her? No, because she's not even over 40.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
whatever age it was, yeah.
No, but it's just cute because, but that's what I'm saying, like, you could take shows like that and actually play off because they might have other statutes that apply, but not certain ones. So you do get into that. I always make a comment just because they always say, what is it, 50 is the new 40s or whatever, 60s. You know how people are living longer? And I always think, gosh, 40 seems really young to me for ages. And I always wonder, like, in time if they'll raise it. They might not. I don't know. You know, but you look at it, because again, you look at when some of these statutes were put into place, most people retire by 65, but guess what? A lot of people aren't retiring, it seems like, at 65 anymore. So that could come into play there. Rehabilitation Act. This act actually has 3 sections. We have Section 501, Section 503, Section 504. 501 applies to federal government, 503 applies to federal contractors, and 504 applies to recipients of federal funds, which leads us into Title I of the Americans with Disability Acts, which is our ADA. Now, under ADA, it prohibits all private employers with 15 or more employees, which means if you're an employer and you only have, say, 5 employees in your company, are you abiding by that law? No. So this is dealing with 15 or more employees. You will be bound to ADA. It does tell you cannot discriminate against individuals with disability who, with or without reasonable accommodations, are qualified to perform the essential function of the job. Now, the Act extends protection beyond the federal level. If the accommodation is going to cause an undue hardship to the employer, then sometimes they do not have to accommodate this. So let me do this for a minute. Let's just say I own a building. And in my building, I have Tanisha works for me, and she works on the 2nd floor at the moment. And all of a sudden, Tanisha has an incident where she becomes disabled, and now she, has to use a wheelchair all the time. Do you see where we're going? And I said I own the building now. Her office is on the second floor. Could I possibly reasonably accommodate her? Yeah, what could I do? Yeah, maybe we put her office on the first floor. If we have an office down there and maybe somebody else would be willing to go up there, that might not be an undue burden because I could reasonably maybe say, okay, would you mind going up to this? And now you can what? Do that. Now let's say I don't own the whole building. I'm only located on the second floor. There is no elevator in this building. And all of a sudden, Tanisha comes to look for employment with me and all of a sudden I can't, what? Do I have to accommodate now and put an elevator into this building?
Could she work remotely though?
We're gonna assume right now she can't, because this is just to say I
Okay.
can't what? Reasonably
Can't accommodate
accommodate her.
her.
That's gonna be an undue burden. Now here, that would be the next question, right? Let's say it is a job where because it is stuff that you can remotely do it, could I maybe accommodate her by saying, okay, I don't have an elevator in our building, but I'll let you work out of where? Your home. You know, and that's what we get into. Is it an undue burden though to accommodate? You know, because if it is gonna be an unreasonable amount for you, they're not gonna force you then to accommodate a disability. And you do have to look at the act because it will define for you what is deemed a disability and all that. If it has that serious impairment, and they'll do all that. And I know some of it has even gotten into your stress and all that sometimes. There's cases out there. Oh, I thought you had a question.
Does the either the employee or the prospective employer or prospective employee have the burden of proof in showing that?
It all goes, yes. Whoever is the plaintiff always has the burden, and then what happens is if you meet that burden, you shift it over.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what, they're either gonna have to show that, well, we couldn't have met that burden, you know, because
Yeah.
Tanisha might come in right off the bat and go, I could work out of this job, it's just data entry. I don't need to be in the office. I could call in all the time when I have questions. I could sit at my house and what? Type it all in. They can scan me all the information or, you know, and if that's not a burden, and then all of a sudden they might have to say to me, well, you show us then how it's a burden. Because she's met it showing that she can be reasonably accommodated. You show us how it's that undue burden on there. So yeah, it kind of becomes that shifting. You shift the burden over to them. And then if they meet that burden and can shift it back to you, is what they try to do. But if they can't meet the burden, then they might be in violation there. The other thing, U.S. citizens, if you are employed, the last thing that's talked about, in foreign countries by American-owned or American-controlled companies, you're protected under Title VII unless compliance would violate the law of the country that the company is located. So any questions on any of this so far? What I thought we could do is maybe take a few and do some questions and break you guys into groups. How's that sound? And look at some of the cases. So if you guys break into your groups, we'll take about 10, 15, and then what I'll do is I'll probably give you guys some of the answers, where I might just wing off the answers. That's okay. Let me know your groups, and I'll get the sign-in sheet passed around. Are you three a group?
I turned this way.
You're going with them, so you two? Okay. I'm gonna need you guys to three.
7-Eleven.
I think that you guys need a text. And it's on my screen. On page 18. Is it you three? I'm gonna give you guys number 6. Page 18. And I'm assuming you three?
Yes.
Number 13 on each end. circle with them and look which ones I gave, and I'm just like, I think I gave them 3 and not 2. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
That's what I was thinking, I'd rather have a woman OBGYN.
Even that doesn't. It's like, we're gonna give you a corner in the back.
Right. It gets easier as you get older, I think.
For what? OBGYN?
Yeah. She was saying how she was like embarrassed to have a guy doctor when she was like 9. Ouch, man.
I still kind of like having my female. I don't know why.
I have a like
Behind you. I mean, it's not to sound mean, but again, you could see where some people, it's that preference and it's just that.
Yeah, you just feel comfortable doing stuff like
Well, and then you see even those stories right now, what was it, Andrew Yang's wife? With, she came out while he was running for election on how the OBGYN, when she was pregnant with her one, did an exam on her with no glove on, and I guess other women are coming out against this doctor now, and she said she felt violated, but she thought that was the norm. She didn't know what to do. She never even told him, like, right off the bat that this had happened. I think it was with her second child or something, because it just got brought up in the election, and I guess I saw somewhere that now 20 other people, I think, are coming out about this doctor. You know, because he didn't call anybody in the room, which is interesting, because even whether you're a female doctor, even the females have someone else in the room with you just for that, and I can see why, though.
Yeah, you're not told either, like, this is how it's supposed to be, there's supposed to be.
That's what she thought. She goes, I just thought that. She goes, all of a sudden, he said, okay, you're ready to go. She goes, oh, wait, there's a problem. She goes, and I just started, you know.
Such a shame.
I was like, any doctor looking down there or looking at my body, because I don't want to feel like that. I don't like my body, really, so it makes me uncomfortable.
But I can see it. That's where I said, like, in certain fields, men might tend to favor women, no matter what. Sometimes some people, how you are. And that's why I said, it's a orientation trip. It's not in
But not to be offensive or anything, I don't know, but it was like there's a lot of I think I would feel more comfortable with that because he doesn't like that, or
That feels
I mean, it is just one of those things that,
but sometimes the males know more than the female.
See, and I always feel like, to me, a female would know a little bit more because, I hate to say it, they have the same body. And I feel like they would get what you're saying, things like, well, I feel this, or I feel this. I'm hoping that they can relate.
Yeah. Like I always, my dad knew a lot about it. A lot about it. He about my body. I don't know why. And I was more comfortable with my dad. So he like taught me a lot about.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that. That's probably why you don't care as much. It's like a guy or girl with certain things. That's cool that your dad knew all that and you're comfortable with them. That's awesome.
Are you guys good?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you guys good, Ashley? Your
Yeah.
group?
Yeah, we finished.
Abby, your group good? Okay. I can kind of tell sometimes what groups are good.
Oh, it was Ellen.
Was it else? Well, that's what I said. I just happened to hear it coming down, but it was interesting because, like, you get into what they did, and they said they violated policy, and
Yeah, that's like a sensitive thing right now.
that's what they
so
said.
we
And
should
because
know.
of it's dealing with the area, you get to the, the origin, And I get why they were doing it. They were playing upon on the words.
Right, yeah, it like was harmless, but it still went against policy, so I get both sides.
Like how you can't show your shoulders and stuff because of distracts and always, like high school.
That always bothered me, like, I would get places where it was like that for girls, but guys could wear white beaters or take their shirts off at gym or something
Yeah, how
like
do you know
that,
it doesn't distract us? We see ads.
Right.
Like, there's people the exact same way.
So you just used the term that made me think of something. Because, I mean, I know exactly when you say wife beaters and stuff, and I just thought to myself, and how many people now would say that's offensive?
Right,
To hear the term, or
Yeah.
just,
Or
Do you know
people
what I
that don't know what
Yeah.
that's, like, what?
Like my gym teacher,
When a new movie comes up, they really want to see.
we were in gym once and I got hit in the chest and I grabbed my chest and I'm like, oh, it hurts. And he goes, it's okay, they're not that big anyways. And my dad was heated, but I didn't want to go to the school on him and make him lose his job. But I was like very upset because he said it in front of the whole class. And I didn't really know if I should go to the principal about that. It made me his step with me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's like a sensitive thing to me. I know, like, I have a small chest, and that was like if somebody said that, especially when I was younger, I was embarrassed about every single thing that went on, Yeah, that would be a big deal.
are you guys good?
My friends that were in our
Okay.
class
Are you guys good? Since all groups look like they're good, you guys ready to get started? You guys have the first one, I know that, because you have number 3. So will one of you read it?
I'll read it.
Right, yeah, now that I'm older, I should.
And I wrote, just so all the groups know, the 5 problems we're working on, so if you want to take notes or anything, because I'll tell you what the outcomes were, too. So go ahead.
I can start reading.
Yep.
Dial Corp implemented a work tolerance test which all new employees were required to pass to obtain employment in its Armor brand sausage making department. Of all the applicants who passed the test, 97% were male and 38% were female. The EEOC demonstrated that the facially neutral work tolerance test caused a disparate impact on women. The defending employer did not deny that the employment practice in the question caused a disparate impact. Rather, the employer responded that the test was job-related and necessary to reduce job-related injuries at the plant and submitted evidence that the numbers of the job injuries exceeded the section of the exemption for employers where the compliance would cause a company to violate the law of the country in which it is located. Had been reduced after implementation of the testing program. The evidence showed that the company had initiated numerous other safety initiatives that had an impact on reducing injuries at the plant. After they failed the test, 52 women were denied jobs besides this case.
So what did you guys decide?
We decided the Dial Corporation will win because the 52 women were denied jobs because of the injury testing. That's why.
It just happened to be like women.
Does everybody agree with that?
I still don't understand what it's saying of the work talent test.
So they had a work tolerance test. All employees had to pass this test in order to get employment with them. Of the applicants who passed the test, 97% were male. Sorry, I didn't mean foul. Were male, and 38% were female. And so EEOC demonstrated that the facially neutral work tolerance test caused a disparate impact. So you put this test in place. You may not have intended for it to discriminate, but what did it really do? It discriminated because more men were passing than what? Female. So you needed to show us that. How did this, because they said that, oh no, even though we didn't mean for the disparate impact, we did this helped job relations, so it was safety, all these type of things. I know the actual outcome of this, so I know they ended up losing. Here, the employer did not meet its burden of persuasion that the work tolerance test led to a reduction in injuries because the company had also initiated numerous other safety initiatives during the time period that likely led to the reduction in injuries at the plant. Do you see where we're going? Even though they said we did this test, they had other things going on that they said probably reduced the injuries. It wasn't the testing, it was probably all your other stuff, and therefore you really were what? Discriminating because your test really had no impact probably on the injuries. It was more, you had more men passing. So here, yeah, the employer was ordered to pay $3.4 million in damages to the 52 women who were denied a job after they failed the test. So, who had number 6?
Oh, that was us. Let me read that. Oh, it doesn't matter. Mohan is a member of the Sikh religion whose practice forbids cutting or shaving facial hair and requires wearing a turban that covers the head. In accordance with the dictates of his religion, Mohan wore a long beard. He applied for a position as a breakfast cook at the Island Manor restaurant. He was told that the restaurant's policy was to forbid cooks to wear facial hair for sanitary and good grooming reasons, and that he would have to shave his beard or be denied a position. Mohan contended that the restaurant had an obligation to make a reasonable accommodation to his religious beliefs and let him keep his beard. Is he correct? Yes, we all agree. Very
Why?
quickly. Because they have to accommodate that. It's a reasonable accommodation, like you said, to wear like a hair net or something that he could, so the hair won't get in the food.
Now,
Because that would be discrimination against your religion if they don't hire you.
here's my next question. In this situation, were they discriminating against just the religion?
No.
Huh? Well, is it any person,
Right.
religion or not? Do you see where we're going?
They're not discriminating, but it's not a regular person that could just be like, oh, I'll just shave it. Like, he's got a reason that he has that, so.
I mean, I've heard of people saying, well, we can wear all this. Do you know what I mean? The net and all that. Here they lost. The restaurant actually won in this situation because judgment was for the restaurant, sanitary reasons, and a consistently applied grooming policy for all employees demonstrate the restaurant could not accommodate their religion without undue business hardship, including the loss of customers who don't like facial hair on their eggs or who are turned off by seeing a cook with facial hair, which also possibly could be like, are they seeing their cooks? Do you know what I mean? Because some people don't, I hate to say this, some people don't like what? Seeing all that because they think of that, or even long hair, they might like people to have their hair up and
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
it might sound bad, but like some of these situations, like in like these classes, the situations we read, a lot of them seem like it's just like, okay, let's just be people. If you have a giant beard, why are you trying to work as a cook? Like, it's gonna cause problems. I don't know. For me, it's like some of the stuff, it seems like people are just looking to cause trouble or to like get into these like cases. Come on.
Well, they do say we are a frivolous nation right now. Lots of lawsuits.
Yeah.
Where they say, sue happy. What can you get?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like his passion. He's just a really good cook. And that's just what he feel like he was born to do,
So maybe he's not looking for trouble, he's just looking for a job with something he loves.
I see both sides. I see that where you could I don't know.
Well, it goes
It's just-
back to, I hate to say this, it kind of goes back even to tattoos, piercings. It's not that I mean, people have a right to express and all their stuff, but sometimes some people look at it and it just what? It turns them off, or they don't want to be worked on. It's not that that person might not be a good nurse or anything, but they might be, I don't want that person working on me. I feel uncomfortable, or I want this. And then sometimes they look at, well, who's your client? And is this going to ruin business? And therefore, we want this in our policy. And it's not that we're discriminating against this one person. We're going to make it what? Across the board, universal. Comment, Isabel, or no?
Yeah, I was just saying, because I used to work at a restaurant, and there was this girl, and she had just like a lot of darker tattoos, but she had a noose on her hand, and she was like a busser, so they made her just like wear like just a thing over it, because they're when you're going to people's tables, they don't really want to see a noose on a hand while they're eating or something. But then there's another girl who just had like flowers on her arm, and she didn't have to cover it up. So then there was like the argument of that. So then it was just like all across the board, you had to cover up if you had tattoos. Now it's a little bit more lenient, but.
Right. But you could see where it could cause an issue, because then they're going to go, well, I got to cover up. Why isn't she for this?
Yeah.
Even at my restaurant that I work at, this guy has like huge gauges, and they make him like tape his ears behind his ear, like the bottom of his ear, just so.
It's like folded or what?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Just so like people, I don't know. It's like a high class restaurant, so they said
Right.
if you want to be hired, that's what you're gonna have to do.
Right, because again, some people might not want to see the big holes in the ear.
Right.
I
don't
mean,
know.
Yeah.
It's weird though.
where you could shoot like quarters and stuff through them. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I mean, I've seen some that are pretty huge, and I'm just like, man, you could like practice
Literally.
shooting something through, and you're like, and I always think to myself, oh, I don't think I'd like that on me.
I have a friend of mine who has gauges, and every once in a while he'll take them out, and then all of a sudden his friends will just like stick their fingers.
You like can't even help it.
They're like, what's this?
Who had number 8?
We did.
Will you guys go?
Overton suffered from depression and was made sleepy at work by medication taken for this condition. Also because of his medical condition, Overton needed a work area away from public access and substantial supervision to complete his tasks. His employer terminated him because of his routinely sleeping on the job, his inability to maintain contact with the public, and his need for supervision. Overton argued that he's a person with a disability under the ADA and the Rehabilitation Act, fully qualified to perform the essential functions of the job, and that the employer had an obligation to make reasonable accommodations, such as allowing some cat naps as needed and providing some extra supervision.
Yeah, we just said that, like, it's kind of not fair, because he doesn't have any proof, really, that he needs rehab or anything, or that he's in rehab. So it's just harder for them to accommodate all of the things that he needs, like a separate space and like supervision and cat naps. Like at that point,
I feel like you just need more proof just besides of like the medication you were taking.
Okay.
I feel like the employer would win in this case, because hearing you read that, if I was the employer, like that's a lot to care for. And I'm not saying I wouldn't be willing to do that, but for someone to need medication, cat naps, supervision, a blanket and a pacifier, like
Yeah,
Right.
There's just a lot to accommodate for just because you're on a certain type of medication. I feel
Right.
like, yeah.
And a lot of money, a lot of extra money.
Yeah.
That's funny. I had I'm in counseling, and she gave me a letter to get, because I have like ADHD and like anxiety, all this stuff, and it just reminded me of that, because there's like she gave me a letter to get. I gave it to one of my teachers, but like I just feel like, but she said that I could have like extra time to do stuff because of that. But then I feel like, well, that like everybody else has to do it, like I can't. I don't know. That's like all these are kind of like, you could argue both sides, but that seems like a lot of extra money for one person.
Well, and it kind of gets, when I always ask you guys, like at the beginning of the semester, like students, if you guys have an accommodation, please make sure I get it so I can what?
Yeah.
If by law I'm supposed to accommodate it, I'm going to accommodate it. But like I usually say, no tape recording. But if law tells me I have to for that person, I'm going to do it for them because it meets the accommodation. And that this one you guys were kind of going with the outcome on here. It was judgment for Overton to the extent that Overton was entitled to a trial to prove that he could perform the essential functions of the job and may thus be viewed as qualified and entitled to reasonable accommodation without undue hardship to the employer. The court recognized that supervisors are prone to view catnaps as inappropriate and unprofessional, but insisted that Overton be allowed to attempt to prove his case. They said let him try and prove his case first before they actually decided.
But, I mean, whether he was qualified or not, like, wouldn't that still be, like, an unreasonable amount of stuff to, because what do they deem reasonable or unreasonable, whether he's qualified or not?
Well, do you have a comment, Brad?
Yeah, he's a lot of, like, if he's taking cat naps at work, right, say, like, every hour he's taking, like, a 10-minute thing or whatever. Say he works 6 hours just for the sake of math. Could he potentially just work another hour at the, so instead of working like an 8-hour day, he's working a 9-hour, but he's taking 10-minute breaks every hour?
And it's funny because the next question for me was author's comments. You know, it said students may be asked to suggest a reasonable accommodation, like how would you guys maybe get this to allow him to continue his work? Their example was Overton could be allowed to take short naps as needed in secluded area where such napping would not demoralize the public and fellow workers. Needless to say, employers would have difficulty accepting the propriety of this type of accommodation. However, the purpose of the ADA and the Rehabilitation Act is to seek out reasonable accommodations once it is determined that the employee in question is a qualified individual.
And in our book, is there any definition of what they deem reasonable, or is that
You don't.
the employer's discretion?
I don't think yours has it. When you actually go to the act, they'll tell you reasonable accommodations, this. Usually it's no undue burden.
Okay.
But what happens is you start reading a lot of cases.
Okay. So.
And you look at what is, because they'll define for you what is the serious disability. Do you know what I mean? Under there, and then you start looking at cases. And you start taking your facts and you look at other cases and you kind of try and make similarities. Well, if this was allowed here, and this was allowed here, this is similar, and therefore it should be allowed here. Or maybe, if you're the other side, this is distinguished from what? This and this and this.
Okay.
And therefore you should not allow, because it's maybe similar to this, this, and this, and they were never allowed.
So you go to the individual statute for.
Yeah,
reasonable
look at
accommodation?
statutes and look at cases, because sometimes the facts, depending on what they're seeking, like what is their disability,
Okay.
you might have case law out there that'll help support what was given.
So you look at the case.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No.
For this case, if Riley was to ask them, I think that's the name of the company down there?
Yeah.
Was to ask him, like, could you ask your doctor, could you take that medication at a different time that won't affect your work? Could they get in trouble for asking that?
That might be them trying to work out like the reasonable accommodation, like does the medicines need to be at this time, where maybe you won't need the naps for do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're trying to figure out an accommodation, and that might help. And again, they might say, or it might be, it doesn't matter when I take it, I still, because some people, you're right, take the medicine and right off the bat they're like this, or some people might be, it doesn't matter, I go through spurts where.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who had number 10?
Manuel Ferjante applied for a clerk job with the city and county of Honolulu. Although he placed high enough on a civil service eligibility list to be chosen for the position, he was not selected because of a perceived deficiency in oral communication skills, because by his heavy Filipino accent. Clerks are constantly dealing with the public, and the ability to speak clearly is one of the most important skills required for the position, according to the city. Ferjante brought suit alleging that the defendants had discriminated against him on the basis of his national origin in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, decide. So at first, we said that he wouldn't win, but then we looked at it again and we saw perceived deficiency in oral communication. And so we thought that was pretty gray, and so we thought that he would probably win because he placed high enough on the civil service eligibility list.
Okay.
And like the verbiage of like perceive is relatively ambiguous, and in a case like that, you would favor it in terms of the employee or the prospective employee.
Okay. Does everyone agree? Here he lost. It was judgment for the city and county of Honolulu. Accents of national origin are inextricably intertwined in many cases. Courts look carefully not at non-selection based on foreign accents because an employer may unlawfully discriminate against someone based on national origin by falsely stating that it was the individual's inability to measure up to the communication skills demanded for the job. Because, and this is why he lost, because the record showed that the ability to speak clearly was one of the most important skills required for the clerk's position, and because the trial court judge confirmed that Fragante was difficult to understand, the court dismissed the complaint. So like he heard him and even couldn't understand him. Yeah. Otherwise, had he been able to understand him, it may have gone what? The opposite. Yeah. And the last one, 13.
Della Janich was employed as a matron at the Yellowstone County Jail in Montana. The duties of the position of matron resemble those of a parallel male position of jailer. Both employees have the responsibility of booking prisoners, showering and dressing them, and placing them in the appropriate section of the jail, depending on the offender's sex. Because 95% of the prisoners at the jail were men and 5% were women, the matron was assigned more bookkeeping duties than the jailer. At all times during Janich's employment at the jail, her male counterparts received $125 more per month as jailers. Janich brought an action under the Equal Pay Act, alleging discrimination against her in her wages because of her sex. The county sheriff not in charge. And we said that even though the actual proportion of what she performed was different than her male counterparts, because the potential was the same for them, they both would have to do the same things at different times, that she should be entitled to the same pay.
Everybody agree? And the court found that. They said the county argued the discrepancy reflected hazardous nature of the jailer's work with male prisoners and the state's interest in protecting women due to the difference in strength between males and females. And the court found that the working conditions substantially equal for matrons and jailers and ruled that the wage distribution was based on sex. The county's proffered reason was the type of anachronistic belief Congress intended to eliminate through the Equal Pay Act. So they have... Yeah. Any questions on any of the ones we did? Can I take 2 minutes or do you guys just want all the answers on Wednesday? Or do you want me to start them at least so you guys have some of them? Because I was going to do the first 2 chapters and I'm just going to fly through. So you guys can just write them down. So you guys have something to start. And then I figured since we just did 39 today, I won't do 39 and I thought I'd hold off on 38 in case you guys wanted to just catch up. So I'm going to do the first, I think 40 I think it is. Well, yeah. You guys ready? So number 1 is true. 2, 3, and 4 are false. 5 is true. 6 is false. 7 is true. 8, 9, and 10 are false. 11 is boy. 12 is boy. 13 is apple. 14 is cat. 15 is apple. 16 is dog. 17 is apple. 18 is cat. 19 is dog. And 20 is dog. Any questions on those?
Well, for the first 2 through 4 were what, false?
2, 3, and 4 were all false. Is that the one you asked, Caleb?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 2, 3, and 4. Any other questions? All right, chapter 37. Number 1 is true. 2 and 3 are false. 4 is true. 5 is false. 6 is true. 7 is false. 8 and 9 are true. And 10 is false. Any questions on the first 10? Okay. 11 is boy, 12 is boy, 13 is apple, 14 is cat, 15 is apple, 16 is dog, 17 is apple, 18 is cat. So 18 is cat, 19 is dog. Whoops. Oh, shoot. Hold on. Let me go back. Can we just go back for 1 second? 11 is apple. 12 is boy. Did I give the other ones accidentally?
12 is B.
Yeah. All of a sudden I looked up, I'm like, wait, I went back to my other ones. Mine are numbered 1 through 40. So, like, they go further. Sorry. So 11 is apple. 12 is boy. 13 is dog. 14 is cat. And then 15, 16, and 17 are all dog. So 15, 16, 17, all dog. 18 is cat, 19 is cat, and 20 is apple.
Good luck with today's lesson.